I swear, the day this whole mess started, I wasn't even thinking about the HOA. I was thinking about breakfast. I walked out my front door with one goal: grab the leftover cinnamon roll from my car because yes, I forgot it there like a gremlin the night before. But the universe had other plans. Right there on my door, slapped on like a parking ticket written by someone having a very bad morning, was a bright orange HOA violation. And not just any violation. No, this thing was glowing like a radioactive Cheeto. At first, I laughed. Out loud. Alone on my porch. Because the notice said I was encroaching on HOA common property. I looked around, confused. What common property? My porch? My welcome mat? Then I read the fine print. They were talking about my driveway. My actual driveway. The one I literally paid for. Now, I'm not a genius, but I'm 99% sure I bought that strip of concrete when I bought the house. I stood there squinting at the paper, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the HOA board had a new intern whose brain was still buffering. I don't know. So I shrugged, laughed again, and said out loud, "It's my driveway." Nice try, though. But then, almost like she'd been hiding behind a bush waiting for her dramatic entrance, the HOA president showed up. She walked over with this smug little stride like she'd just rehearsed it in her mirror. And with the most confident tone you can imagine, she said, "Actually, it isn't." I blinked. Twice. What? She handed me a copy of some highlighted map that looked like it had been printed from Clipart 2004. She pointed at my driveway, not really at it, more like near it, and said, "This is part of the HOA's shared easement. Meaning you're using HOA property without authorization." I stared at the map. Then at my driveway. Then back at her. "Ma'am, this is my driveway." She tilted her head like I was the one confused. "No. It's common property. You're encroaching." I swear, the confidence was unreal. I wish I believed in myself the way she believed in that nonsense map. At this point, my brain went through all 5 stages of grief in record time. Denial, no way she's serious. Anger, why is she serious? Bargaining, maybe she needs coffee. Depression, my cinnamon roll is still in the car. Acceptance, oh, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is a power move. And you know the moment when you can just feel someone is trying to control something simply because they can? Yeah. The air basically crackled with it. "So," I said slowly, "you're telling me that this driveway, that I maintain, that I shovel in winter, that I literally park on every day, is yours?" She nodded like I'd finally caught up. "And," I added, "you're giving me a violation for using my driveway." "That's correct." The silence that followed was loud. Even the birds paused. I stepped closer and tapped the map with my finger. "This drawing doesn't even look like my street." She snatched it back. "The board has already reviewed it." "Oh, great." The board. The mysterious group of people who meet twice a month to decide whether my trash can is 1 inch too visible. "Okay," I said, trying not to laugh again, "so what exactly is the issue?" She crossed her arms. "You're using HOA property without permission. You cannot park there." I swear my soul left my body for a second. "Ma'am," I said, "it's a driveway. What else am I supposed to do with it? Host a tea party?" She didn't even smile. She just said, "You will need to remove your vehicle until this is resolved. A fine will be added daily if you do not comply." A fine. For parking on my own property. At this point I was convinced she woke up that morning and chose villain mode. I took a deep breath because my brain was screaming, but my mouth was trying to stay polite. "Look, this has to be a mistake. I bought this house. I bought the land. The driveway came with it." She smiled in the most condescending way possible and said, "We'll see." And then she walked away, actually walked away like she had just delivered a grand plot twist and was waiting for dramatic music to kick in. I looked down at the orange violation again. I looked at my poor car, still holding my cinnamon roll hostage. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't paperwork. This wasn't confusion. This was the HOA president flexing control she absolutely did not have. And I knew, right then, this wasn't going to be one of those talk it out and fix it moments. This was the start of a fight. A stupid fight. A petty fight. But a fight I was absolutely not going to lose. Because if there is one thing I'm not doing, it's letting someone claim they own my driveway. Not on my property. Not on my watch. 2 days after the whole "your driveway is our driveway" showdown, I woke up to something even better than the radioactive orange violation. This time, the HOA went full corporate mode. A formal letter. And I mean formal. Thick envelope. Bold header. The kind of paper that feels like it cost more than the logic used to write it. I sat at my kitchen table, opened it up, and read the first line. You must stop parking on your driveway immediately. I actually looked around my empty kitchen, like someone was filming me for a prank show. Stop parking on my driveway? I said out loud, to nobody. I kept reading. You are required to submit a plan to restore HOA property to its original condition. Restore, what? To original condition? What condition? It's concrete. It's a slab. You can't restore concrete. What am I supposed to do? Rewind time? I shook my head, kept reading, and then hit the real punch to the face. Daily fines will begin 72 hours from the date of this notice. I had to put the letter down for a minute. I needed to breathe. And hydrate. And maybe scream into a pillow. I picked the letter back up and read the whole thing again. Then a third time. Then a fourth. On the fifth read-through, I started reading it slower, like maybe the words would magically rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. The letter basically said, stop using the driveway you own. Fix the driveway they think they own. Pay fines for existing. The signature at the bottom was the HOA president, of course, written in dramatic cursive like she was signing the Declaration of Independence. At this point, I realized something important. If the HOA could put this much confidence into a letter this absurd, then they were either deeply misinformed or deeply committed to being unreasonable. Neither option was good. I leaned back in my chair and thought, okay, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I missed something. So I grabbed my closing documents, the giant, heavy stack of papers I hadn't looked at since the day I signed my life away to a mortgage. It took me a full 10 minutes of flipping, digging, and almost giving up before I finally found the section I needed, the plat map. You know that moment in movies when a character finally discovers the clue they need and dramatic music hits? Yeah, this was like that, except instead of music, my fridge made a weird buzzing noise. I spread the plat map across the table. Thick black lines. Lot boundaries. Measurements. A clear little box labeled driveway sitting right on my property. I traced the lines with my finger just to be sure. Lot number? Mine. Metes and bounds? Mine. Driveway? Extremely, obviously, definitely mine. I even held the map up to the sunlight like some kind of ancient treasure parchment. Maybe the HOA president had some hidden symbol I wasn't seeing. Nope. Just plain, boring, unmistakable property lines. I sat back and whispered, there's no way they looked at this. Because if they had, they wouldn't have sent that letter. And if they did look at it and still sent the letter? Then we had a whole different problem. The more I stared at the map, the more I realized the truth. Either the board didn't check their facts. Or they checked them and simply did not care. Honestly, I wasn't sure which was worse. On one hand, a board too lazy to verify basic information is terrifying. On the other hand, a board that knows the truth but pushes their own narrative anyway is even scarier. I went back to the letter, now lying on the table like a villain monologue. The wording was so confident. So bold. So absolutely disconnected from reality. Stop parking. Restore property. Fines start soon. It felt less like a notice and more like a threat wrapped in HOA stationery. I took a deep breath and thought, okay. They picked the wrong guy for this. The driveway wasn't some mysterious zone in limbo. It wasn't shared. It wasn't common property. It wasn't theirs. And now, after this letter, I had something I didn't have before. Proof. Clear, written, documented proof. I folded the plat map neatly, placed it next to the letter, and stared at the two documents side by side. One was reality. The other was creative fiction. That was the moment the tension really kicked in. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was turning into a full-on battle over property lines, logic, and whatever personal power trip the HOA president was riding on. And as I sat there with my documents and my confusion slowly turning into determination, I realized something simple. If they wanted a fight, I was finally ready to give them one. A couple of days after the famous "stop using your own driveway" letter, I thought things might calm down. You know, maybe the HOA president would realize she misread a map upside down or something. But nope. Instead, the neighborhood got weird. It started on a Tuesday evening. I had just sat down with a plate of leftover pasta when there was a knock on my door. Not a friendly knock, one of those soft, hesitant knocks that sounds like the person doing it doesn't want to be caught knocking. I opened the door and found my neighbor, Karen, not that kind of Karen, but a peaceful plant-watering one, standing there like she was about to confess a crime. She leaned in and whispered, "Hey, so? I heard about the driveway thing." I sighed. Yeah. Apparently my driveway belongs to the HOA now. Next week they'll claim my shoes. She didn't even laugh. She just looked around like spies were hiding in the bushes. I think, she whispered even quieter, they're trying to use it for the walkway. I blinked. What walkway? The aesthetic walkway. The what? She shrugged. The board keeps talking about some decorative community path they want to create. They said they wanted to connect the cul-de-sac to the clubhouse. And your driveway is, you know, right in the middle. I stared at her. Are you telling me they want to turn my driveway into a sidewalk? She nodded, like this was the most normal sentence a human could nod at. Before I could respond, she added, I didn't tell you this. Then she hurried away like she had just passed me top-secret intel and the government was tracking her. I closed the door slowly. A walkway? A decorative path? Through my lot? Surely she misunderstood. Surely no one would look at a perfectly normal driveway and think, you know what would make this better? A scenic walking trail. I went back to my pasta, but I only got 2 bites in before another knock came. This one louder. More confident. Like the person didn't care who saw them. I opened the door to find my other neighbor, Dave, standing there holding a beer like he was ready for story time. Bro, he said. The HOA's coming for you. Yeah, I said, I gathered. No, dude, like really coming for you. People are talking. Apparently, according to Dave's version of events, the HOA president had been complaining during a board meeting that my driveway was interrupting the flow of her Dream Path project. She apparently even used the words visual disruption. My face must have twisted into something weird because Dave laughed and said, yeah, man. Your driveway is ruining her fantasy landscaping vision. She wants some kind of winding path with benches and bushes and whatever. And she wants to put it on my property? Seems like it. I shook my head. That's insane. He nodded. You're not the only one she's bothered. Last year she tried to make me repaint my garage door because she said the color felt tired. What does that even mean? A tired color? I shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. Before he left, he patted my shoulder. Watch your back, man. This feels planned. And just like that, the rumors started piling up fast. Every time I stepped outside, someone else had a story. A whispered warning. A frustrated rant. An eye roll aimed at the HOA. One neighbor told me the board had been talking about reclaiming space for community enhancement for months. Another swore the HOA president had said, "We need that area for the path, whether he likes it or not." Someone else, an older guy who walked his dog past my house every morning, told me he once got a violation because his recycling bin lid wasn't fully closed. His dog looked equally traumatized. Each story made things clearer. This wasn't a random nitpick. This wasn't a simple mistake on a map. This wasn't about property lines at all. It was a mission. A quiet, sneaky, completely unnecessary mission to push a so-called decorative community path straight through my lot. And the driveway? Yeah. It was step one. The more neighbors talked, the more things connected. The sudden violation. The confident letter. The bizarre claim that my driveway was common property. The refusal to listen to reason. The HOA wasn't confused. They were preparing for something. Organizing. Positioning. And somehow, in the middle of all that, my driveway had become target number one. By the time I went to bed that night, I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was energized. Focused. Ready. Because now I finally understood what was going on. This wasn't a petty rule argument. This wasn't about concrete. This was about control. And if they wanted a battle over a walkway they hadn't even built yet? Well, they picked the wrong driveway to mess with. The HOA said they wanted to discuss the matter further, which is HOA language for prepare for nonsense. But I went anyway because I figured, hey, if I show up with real documents, real maps, and real proof, maybe logic would win. Wow. What a fool I was. The meeting was at the clubhouse, 6 p.m. sharp. I walked in expecting maybe a round table, some folding chairs, maybe a bowl of mints if someone was feeling generous. Instead, I walked into something that looked like a low-budget courtroom drama. Up front, the HOA board sat behind a long table, raised slightly on a little platform like they were judges on a talent show. The president sat in the middle, in a big chair that was definitely purchased to look more important than everyone else's. She had a gavel. A literal gavel. Why? No idea. HOA laws don't require one. She just likes the sound, I guess. There were about 12 seats for residents. Half were filled. All eyes turned to me the second I walked in, like I was entering a trial for crimes against humanity instead of parking. I took a seat. The president tapped her gavel the way a toddler smacks a toy drum. "We will now address the issue of Lot 14's driveway encroachment," she announced. Lot 14. That was me. Great. She pulled out a stack of papers, cleared her throat, and started reading accusations like the verdict had already been delivered. Unauthorized use of HOA common property. Failure to comply with corrective orders. Refusal to acknowledge shared easement boundaries. I raised my hand. I did acknowledge them. I acknowledged they don't exist. She glared at me. "You will have your turn to speak." Okay then. When she finished reading her list of imaginary crimes, she looked at me like she expected me to beg for forgiveness or sacrifice a goat or something. Instead, I stood up, placed my folder on the table in front of them, and said, "Cool. My turn." First, I pulled out my property deed. "This is the deed," I said. "My name. My signature. My land. My driveway." I placed it down gently. Then I pulled out the official survey, the kind done by an actual licensed professional who uses real measurements and not crayons. "This shows the exact boundaries of my property," I said. "Surveyed twice, by the way. For accuracy." Down it went. Then, for the grand finale, the plat map. "This," I said, spreading it out, "is the county-approved map. Black and white. Clear lines. No interpretation needed." The room got quiet. Some neighbors leaned in. One board member squinted like they were seeing math for the first time. The president barely looked at it. She didn't even lean forward. She just crossed her arms and said, HOA records supersede owner interpretation. I blinked. Interpretation? These are legal documents. They're not interpretive dance. A few people snorted. She shot them a look of death. I tapped the deed. This is literally the law. She tapped her stack of HOA printouts. These are HOA regulations. I stared at her. You know HOA rules don't override property ownership, right? The treasurer chimed in, voice shaky but proud. We have older records that show the area as part of the original community easement design. I leaned over to see their older records. You ever see a document printed so badly it looks like it was faxed from 1973 through a toaster? Yeah. That. I said, this is a PDF photo of a map. With no legend. No labels. No measurements. And that is a coffee stain. The treasurer covered it with his hand. I tried again. Calm voice. Slow breathing. Look. I'm not asking for anything complicated. The driveway is on my lot. It has always been on my lot. I'm showing you the official proof. All you have to do is look. The president leaned back in her important chair and said the most ridiculous sentence I'd ever heard. The board has already reached a decision. A decision based on what? I asked. She smiled. HOA records. I felt my jaw actually drop. They didn't care about the survey. Or the deed. Or the plat map. Or reality. Facts didn't matter. Documents didn't matter. Logic absolutely did not matter. This wasn't a meeting. It was an ambush. They weren't there to solve anything. They were there to intimidate me into backing down. I gathered my papers slowly, looking each board member in the eye. Some looked guilty. Some looked unsure. But the president? She stared at me with that same smug energy from the first day. She wanted me to fold. To give up. To say, okay, fine, take the driveway. Not happening. I closed my folder, stood up, and said, thanks for your time. I'll handle this another way. Then I walked out. Outside the clubhouse, I sat in my car for a moment, stunned. The arrogance I just witnessed was unreal. They weren't confused. They were convinced they could rewrite reality just by saying it out loud. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt something else. Fuel. If they wanted a fight? Oh, I was definitely ready now. After the circus-level disaster that was the board meeting, I knew one thing for sure: if I was going to shut this down, I needed someone with credentials. Someone with authority. Someone whose word couldn't be brushed aside by HOA records. So I hired a licensed land surveyor. If you've never seen a real surveyor at work, let me tell you, they show up like they're about to scan the surface of Mars. The guy arrived in a truck packed with tripods, laser scanners, GPS receivers, and at least one gadget that looked like it could detect ghosts. He introduced himself, shook my hand firmly, and said, "So, where's the trouble?" I pointed at the driveway. "That," I said, "apparently belongs to the HOA now." The man blinked once, slowly. "The concrete?" "Yep." He stared at it for a second, then turned back to me with the face of someone who just heard the worst joke ever. "All right," he said, "let's see what the universe thinks." He set up his equipment with this calm confidence, like he already knew the answer. Meanwhile, I hovered nearby like an anxious parent waiting for test results. He started scanning, measuring, marking points, and checking them against the recorded coordinates of my lot. He paced back and forth, typed numbers into his handheld device, adjusted his tripod, typed more numbers, and occasionally muttered things like, "Yep, Mum, that's what I thought." Every time he muttered, I leaned in a little, trying to read his mind. No luck. Surveyors are poker-faced by profession. After about an hour, he waved me over. "So," he said, "let me walk you through this." He pulled up a digital map on his tablet, my lot outlined in crisp, perfect lines. Then he pointed to the driveway, shaded neatly inside the boundary. "This driveway," he said, tapping the screen, "is 100% your private property. No easement. No shared zone. No overlap. It's clean." I felt my shoulders drop with the deepest, most satisfying relief ever. "You're sure?" I asked, even though I already knew he was. He chuckled. "Trust me. This thing," he tapped his laser scanner, "costs more than my truck. It doesn't lie." I stared at the map again, just taking in how stupidly clear it was. Meanwhile, the surveyor crouched next to the concrete and shook his head. "HOA giving you trouble?" he asked. I laughed. It was either laugh or scream. "Oh, you have no idea." He let out that tired sigh of someone who has seen things, deeply unnecessary things. "You'd be surprised," he said. "This is more common than you think. Some boards get a little creative with what they claim belongs to them." "Creative," I repeated. "That's a nice way of saying delusional." He smirked. "Your words, not mine." I told him the whole story, the violation, the letter, the rumors, the board meeting, the president with her magical superseding HOA records. He listened with the patience of a man who had heard worse, which honestly was comforting and concerning at the same time. When I finished, he stood up, brushed the dirt off his hands, and said, "Well, the good news is you now have a professionally certified survey. If they try anything else, you're covered." "And by covered," I said, "you mean legally armed." "Exactly that." He handed me the official report, a thick packet with diagrams, measurements, and his stamped signature. It felt like holding a weapon forged out of pure facts. "This is airtight," he said. "If they push this further, they'll have a problem." I thanked him, and before he left, he gave me one last piece of advice. "HOAs don't like being wrong," he said. "But they really don't like being proven wrong by someone with better paperwork." Then he climbed into his truck, waved, and drove off, probably to go rescue someone else from another HOA's nonsense. I stood there on my driveway, holding the survey in my hands, feeling something shift. For the first time since this whole ridiculous fight started, the power wasn't on their side anymore. It was on mine. No more guessing. No more rumors. No more dealing with the president's smug smile like she ruled the neighborhood. I had hard evidence, real documentation that the HOA was overstepping, inventing claims, and basically freelancing their own version of reality. And the best part? Now that I had the truth set in stone, literally measured down to the inch, I was done playing defense. If they wanted to escalate this, I was ready. After the surveyor left and I stood there holding my shiny, professionally stamped proof of ownership, I honestly thought the HOA would finally calm down. Admit they made a mistake, apologize, maybe even pretend to care about facts. Something. Ha! Nope. They went full villain mode instead. The first strike came the next morning. I walked outside and found another letter in my mailbox. A new one. White envelope, bold print, the whole "we mean business" look. I opened it and nearly laughed. They had doubled the fines. Not increased. Not adjusted. Doubled. They went from annoying to "this is starting to feel personal" in one step. Apparently, because I continued to unlawfully occupy HOA common property, the fines would now accrue at twice the original rate. I stared at the number on the paper and muttered, "Good luck collecting that." But that wasn't even the real hit. Later that afternoon, I got an email with the subject line: "Cease and desist, parking violation." I opened it, and my jaw actually dropped. They sent me a literal cease and desist letter. For using my own driveway. It read like something drafted by a lawyer who lost a bet. Lots of dramatic legal terms. Lots of bold text. Lots of "you must immediately cease parking on said property." And then, the truly insane part. They threatened to tow any vehicles parked on the driveway. I reread that line 3 times. Tow my car. From my own driveway. Imagine waking up, walking outside, and seeing a tow truck hooked up to your car while you're standing on your own land. I had to sit down because I could already picture myself sprinting outside in slippers yelling, "Unhook that right now." But they weren't done. A few hours later, when I thought the nonsense level had reached its limit, I got one more message, this time from a board member directly. Not the president. Not the treasurer. One of the quieter ones. The one who always looks like he doesn't want to be there. He wrote, "It's easier to comply than fight." That was it. Short. Cold. Not even a greeting. I actually laughed out loud. Not a normal laugh, one of those "what is my life" laughs. Because that was the moment it clicked. They didn't think I had proof. They didn't think I had a surveyor. They didn't think I had the energy to push back. They thought I'd fold. Just like everybody else apparently did. And suddenly, all the weird stories my neighbors had told me made perfect sense. The tired paint color, the invisible bins, the decorative walkway vision, it wasn't just bad management. It was a pattern. A strategy. Wear people down until they give up. Hit them with letters, fines, threats, more letters, more threats, and make them so exhausted that they eventually say, "You know what, fine, take it, do whatever." It was psychological warfare. The HOA wasn't trying to prove anything. They weren't arguing facts. They weren't even pretending to care about the documents I gave them. Their entire plan was pressure. Pure pressure. The kind designed to make normal people quit, because fighting back takes time and energy and money, and most folks don't have all three. But here's the thing they didn't expect. I'm stubborn. Stubborn like argue with a vending machine that stole my dollars. Stubborn. Stubborn like refuse to lose a fight I never asked for but now absolutely will win. I reread that board member's email one more time. It's easier to comply than fight. Yeah. No. Not for me. I grabbed my folder of documents, the deed, the survey, the plat map, and spread them out across my table. I looked at every line, every measurement, every official stamp. I had truth sitting right in front of me. The HOA had imagination. And arrogance. And a president who clearly thought she could steamroll me the same way she had steamrolled everyone else. But now I wasn't stressed. I wasn't confused. I wasn't scared of their letters or fines or their imaginary shared easement. I was done playing their game. If they wanted to escalate this into a battle of paperwork, law, and basic reality? Fine. I was all in. And after everything they'd just thrown at me, after every threat and every ridiculous letter, they had no idea how badly they just motivated me. If there's one thing HOAs hate more than trucks parked on driveways, it's paperwork they can't control. So after weeks of threats, fines, and friendly reminders written like court summons, I finally decided, yep, time to bring in the big guns. I made an appointment with a real estate attorney, someone who actually handles HOA messes for a living. Walking into his office felt like stepping into a different universe. No pastel-colored violation notices taped to anything. No clipboards. No passive-aggressive posters saying "compliance builds community." Just peace, and a big wooden desk that probably cost more than my driveway. He looks up from his laptop, gives me that calm lawyer nod, and says, "So, what brings you in?" I laugh. My HOA thinks my driveway isn't mine. He pauses, then raises an eyebrow. Oh. This should be fun. Show me everything. I hand him the neat little folder I'd created: deed, survey, plats, photos, screenshots of their ridiculous emails. He flips through the pages like he's reading a comic book he already knows the ending to. And then, it happens. He smiles. Not a polite smile. Not a "thanks for coming in" smile. No. This was the predator on the savannah smile. He leans back in his chair, taps the papers, and says, "They picked the wrong homeowner." I swear that moment alone was worth the consultation fee. He starts laying things out like he's assembling an Avengers battle plan. First, he drafts a demand letter, the legal equivalent of "stop messing around before we embarrass you in court." It basically says, the driveway is mine. The HOA is wrong. And if they don't back off, they'll be paying me instead of fining me. Then he pulls out a second document. A lawsuit draft. Now, I've never sued anyone before, but seeing your name on top of a legal document with the words plaintiff versus HOA underneath kind of gives you superpowers. I felt like I was leveling up in a video game. He continues writing, adding sections I didn't even know existed. Wrongful fines. Harassment. Overreach of authority. Attempted interference with private property. Emotional stress, my favorite part, because I really had aged 5 years since their first violation. By the time he prints everything out, I'm grinning so much my cheeks hurt. This, he says, pointing to the stack of papers, is what HOAs hope you never hire. Then he walks me through the next steps like a calm coach before the big game. Step 1, he'll send the demand letter. Step 2, if they ignore it as he fully expects, they'll get served. Step 3, we file for damages, and the HOA will have to explain to a judge why they think my driveway is part of their shared easement kingdom. He even mentions attorney fees. Meaning if we win, I don't pay him, they do. At this point I'm floating. The last few weeks had felt like being trapped in a battle I couldn't win. Every time they escalated, I felt smaller. But now? Suddenly I wasn't alone. Suddenly I had someone who knew every rule in the book and how to use those rules like weapons. Before I leave, I ask him the question that's been eating at me. Do HOAs actually try this stuff often? He sighs. More than you'd think. Some boards get a little power hungry. They count on homeowners not understanding the law. But when someone pushes back, he taps my file again. They usually fold. I walk out of his office feeling lighter than I have in weeks. The sun even looks brighter, like nature itself approves of legal action. I get into my car, and before I even start the engine, my phone buzzes a new email from the HOA. Another fine. Another threat. Another "you must comply." And for the first time, I don't panic. I don't feel cornered. I don't even feel annoyed. I actually laugh. Out loud. In the parking lot. Because they have no idea what's coming. They don't know I have a full survey proving they're wrong. They don't know a demand letter is being drafted with their names all over it. They don't know a lawsuit is sitting on my lawyer's desk like a loaded slingshot. All they know is the old version of me, the stressed, confused homeowner checking documents at midnight trying to make sense of madness. But that version is gone. Now I've got backup. Now I've got strategy. Now I've got an attorney whose smile alone could end a board meeting. This chapter of the fight wasn't about the driveway. It was about getting my power back. And trust me, it worked. Next step? Let the HOA feel the shift. Filing a lawsuit sounds dramatic, but honestly? After everything the HOA had put me through, it felt like checking something off a grocery list. Milk, eggs, bread, legal action. My attorney drafted the final version with all the confidence of a guy who's done this 100 times. And maybe he had. He slid the papers across the desk like he was dealing winning cards in a casino. Read through it, he said, though it already looked perfect to me. At this point, I trusted this man more than I trust my GPS. The lawsuit laid it all out. A declaratory judgment to confirm the driveway is my property. Reimbursement for every ridiculous fine they'd slapped on me. Compensation for attorney fees, because yeah, someone's paying for this paperwork and it's not me. And a nice little note about HOA overreach, just to make it clear we weren't playing around. I signed the documents, and that was it. Boom. Official. Filed in civil court. And let me just say, hitting submit on a lawsuit feels like launching a missile. My attorney grinned like he'd been waiting for me to join the club. They'll get notified within the week, he said. Be ready. Oh, I was ready. I'd been ready since the day they told me my own driveway was common property. The funny part? As soon as the suit was filed, the HOA went completely silent. Like, silent. No threats. No emails. No new fines magically appearing in my inbox at 2 a.m. It was like someone unplugged them. For 2 whole weeks. Nothing. It was almost peaceful, like those 2 minutes after you turn off a vacuum and your brain is still ringing. I didn't trust it, though. HOAs don't just stop. If anything, silence meant something was cooking. Turns out, I was right. At exactly 6:14 p.m. on a Thursday, because chaos always arrives after business hours, I get an email from the board. The subject line: Proposed Settlement Discussion. Ah, yes. That classic HOA move. They flip your world upside down for months and then suddenly want to talk. I open the email, and I swear. I had to read it twice to make sure it wasn't satire. They said they were willing to look into the matter again if I agreed to drop the lawsuit. No apology. No admission they messed up. Just a tiny breadcrumb they hoped I'd chase. It was basically, hey, if you stop hitting us, we might think about maybe possibly checking to see if we were wrong in the first place. I almost replied with, let me think about it. No. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney. His response? One line. Absolutely not. He followed it up with, they're trying to avoid having a judge look at their paperwork. Means we're on the right track. Honestly, that was all I needed to hear. So we declined. Formally. Politely. Professionally. But in spirit? It was the sassiest no I've ever felt. A few days later, I get another email, this time from the court. Our date was set. And that's when reality hit the HOA like a falling garage door. Because here's the thing. Board members can play pretend during meetings. They can talk tough in emails. They can hand out violations like candy. But in a courtroom? There's no HOA interpretation. No community guidelines. No, we don't think your driveway is yours. Just the law. And the law was on my side. I imagined the board reading the notice, their wine glasses shaking, fonts enlarging, panic settling in. Maybe they even held an emergency meeting to discuss the aggressive actions of the homeowner, aka me finally defending myself. For the first time since this whole mess started, they were the ones scrambling. And me? I was calm. Almost relaxed. I'd done everything right. I had proof, documents, a survey, and now a court date. The storm they created was finally blowing back in their direction. It felt like the beginning of the final round. The moment when the music shifts in a movie and you just know the main character is done playing nice. They wanted a fight. Now they were getting one. In front of a judge. And trust me, I wasn't backing down. If filing the lawsuit felt like launching a missile, then Discovery was watching it hit the target in slow motion. My attorney called me one morning sounding way too cheerful for a man who spends his life reading legal documents. Got the HOA's internal emails, he said. His tone? Pure amusement. Mine? Pure curiosity. I drove to his office faster than the speed limit recommends, allegedly. When I got there, he already had a stack of printed emails spread across his desk. Not neatly. Not organized. More like he'd tossed them down with the giddy energy of a kid who just discovered his birthday presents early. Sit down, he said. You're gonna love this. I wasn't sure what love meant in lawyer terms, but, wow. He wasn't wrong. The first email he hands me is from one of the board members. It reads, pretty sure the driveway is technically the homeowner's property. Pretty sure. Like they were talking about the weather. But that wasn't even the best part. Right under it, the HOA president had replied. Let's claim it anyway. He won't fight it. I had to reread it 3 times. They literally admitted they knew they were wrong, and decided to push forward on purpose. My attorney just shook his head, laughing under his breath. Do they not understand that email is written proof? Apparently not. Then came the next batch. These emails weren't about property lines. Nope. They were about me. One board member wrote, "Homeowner is being too stubborn." Another replied, "He needs to be taught compliance." Taught compliance? Like I was a puppy chewing shoes? I leaned back in my chair and just stared at the paper. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. My attorney just tapped the page. Judges love these. Shows intent. Shows harassment. Shows abuse of power. We could win on this paragraph alone. Honestly, I didn't know whether to laugh or be offended. Probably both. But the real jaw-drop moment came with the next email he slid across the desk. This one was from the president again, because of course it was. She wrote, "The driveway area would be perfect for the pet walkway extension." I blinked. Pet walkway, what? My attorney grinned. Oh yeah. They weren't trying to protect HOA property. They were trying to take yours for some future project. A pet walkway. A literal path for dogs. On my land. This entire war, months of fines, threats, meetings, letters, because they wanted my driveway as part of a neighborhood dog trail? I had no words. Only disbelief. And then the attorney said the line of the century. "This is a slam dunk." He said it casually, like we were talking about ordering lunch. But my brain replayed those words in slow motion surrounded by fireworks. Slam. Dunk. Two of the best words you can hear during a lawsuit. He kept handing me more emails, each more ridiculous than the last. One board member even wrote, "If we push hard enough, he'll give in like the others." And there it was, the confirmation I'd suspected from the beginning. They weren't doing this because of rules or property boundaries. They were doing it because they assumed I'd fold. I was just another name on a list of people they thought they could pressure into silence. But instead of folding, I'd brought an attorney who was now grinning like a man watching a comedy show. And honestly, I started grinning too. By the time we finished reading through everything, I felt this huge shift inside me. For months I'd been on defense, reacting to their nonsense, scrambling to respond, trying to prove what should have been obvious from day one. But now they were the ones caught. Caught lying. Caught planning. Caught scheming for a pet walkway like cartoon villains. My attorney leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "They have no legal ground. No factual ground. And now we've got proof they acted in bad faith." Bad faith. Those two words alone can flip a lawsuit upside down. I nodded slowly. "So what happens next?" He smiled, big, confident, and absolutely entertained. "Next? We show this to the judge." I walked out of his office that day with my head high and my stress levels at an all-time low. Because discovery didn't just reveal the truth. It revealed their motives. Their arrogance. Their behind-the-scenes strategy. And honestly, their pettiness. And best of all? It handed us exactly what we needed. The HOA wanted a fight. But thanks to their own emails, they had just armed us perfectly for the final round. The day of the court hearing felt like walking into a movie. I didn't sleep much the night before, but I wasn't nervous in the usual heart-racing way. More like the calm before a storm, except the storm had me on the winning side. When I arrived, the courtroom was packed. I recognized a few neighbors from the earlier HOA gossip sessions, Karen with her hushed warnings, Dave holding his coffee like a shield, and even a couple of other curious residents. Apparently, the drama of the driveway that wasn't a driveway had spread like wildfire. I took my seat and glanced at the other side of the room. The HOA president arrived in full look at me, I run this town mode. She brought her board members, their papers stacked neatly, and faces carefully composed. Too composed. Overconfidence smells like that. I'd learned it the hard way. The hearing began, and my attorney stepped up first. Calm. Confident. Practically glowing with the smug satisfaction of someone about to watch justice happen. He started by laying out the evidence. The official survey, with exact measurements and property boundaries. My deed, stamped, signed, undeniable. County plat maps, clearly marking the driveway on my lot. And, the cherry on top, internal HOA emails showing the board knew the driveway was mine but tried to claim it anyway. The judge looked through the documents, flipping pages, squinting, nodding slowly. You could feel the tension in the room like a rope being stretched to its limit. Then came the golden moment. The judge turned to the HOA president, gaze sharp and unwavering. Did you review the property documents before issuing fines? The room went silent. You could almost hear a pin drop. The president opened her mouth, paused, cleared her throat, and then stumbled through a series of excuses. Well, we, believed the easement might extend to the driveway. We tried to ensure compliance with community standards. The paperwork is complicated. It was like watching someone try to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope over a pit of alligators. Every word made her look less credible, and more like someone who'd gotten caught red-handed. My attorney stood calmly, hands clasped behind his back, barely suppressing a smile. I sat quietly, trying not to grin, because let's be honest, that grin would have broken the courtroom acoustics. After a few more minutes of explanations that basically said, we were wrong but let's pretend we weren't, the judge slammed the gavel lightly and gave a ruling that felt like a cannon going off. The driveway is legally mine. The HOA must revoke all violations. The HOA must reimburse all fines. The HOA must pay my attorney fees in full. That last part made me want to stand up and cheer. Not only had I been vindicated, but they were going to literally pay for trying to be ridiculous. The room erupted in murmurs. Neighbors exchanged nods and quiet congratulations. Dave even gave me a subtle fist pump. Karen, bless her, just smiled and shook her head like she'd been waiting for this day forever. The HOA president sat frozen, blinking, trying to process that the gavel didn't just end the meeting, it ended her little fantasy of claiming the driveway. The board members around her looked equally stunned, silently calculating how this would play out in future neighborhood gossip. After the formalities, I gathered my documents and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, the air felt crisp and celebratory. People approached me with smiles, handshakes, even a few pats on the back. One neighbor jokingly asked if I'd like help putting up a driveway belongs to Hazel sign. I laughed. The tension I'd carried for weeks, the stress of letters, fines, threats, and absurd emails, finally released in a rush of relief. The legal documents in my hand weren't just papers anymore, they were proof that standing your ground works, even when the odds feel stacked. The HOA had tried to intimidate me, manipulate me, and rewrite reality. But the law, the facts, and a solid survey had spoken louder than their gavel-wielding theatrics. As I drove home that afternoon, I looked at my driveway, the very same one the HOA had claimed, and for the first time in weeks, it felt entirely mine. Not just legally, but morally, emotionally, and maybe even heroically. Victory never tasted sweeter than the smell of asphalt and the faint, lingering scent of HOA panic in the air. I had won. Decisively. And everyone knew it. By the time I pulled into my driveway that evening, word had already started spreading like wildfire. Not the kind of wildfire you panic over, more like the satisfying, finally someone did it kind. Neighbors were whispering, waving, and occasionally honking as if my victory had unlocked some unspoken HOA rebellion mode. The next morning, things got interesting. I stepped outside to grab the paper and immediately noticed the usual HOA-mandated perfection had cracks. Big ones. Front yards that had been trimmed to ridiculous geometric standards suddenly looked a little overgrown. Trash bins were out on the curb a day early. Sidewalk decorations popped up that technically violated guidelines. I smirked. Word of my courtroom win had traveled fast. Suddenly, people who had quietly endured fines and letters were rereading their own HOA notices with fresh skepticism. Conversations popped up in driveways, at bus stops, even at the local coffee shop. Did you see what Hazel did? She actually fought them. And won. And just like that, the aura of invincibility the HOA had carefully cultivated evaporated. The ripple effects were immediate. Multiple homeowners started revisiting their violations and questioning the board's authority. One neighbor, who had been fined for having solar lights that clashed with the community aesthetic, marched straight to the president's door. Another asked why the HOA had tried to dictate the color of their garage door paint. It wasn't long before complaints snowballed into a small rebellion. I started seeing emails and posts circulating in the neighborhood group chat. People were demanding explanations, asking for records, and most damningly, calling for the president's resignation. The energy shifted from passive compliance to active resistance. 2 board members, clearly sensing the tidal wave coming, stepped down immediately. No dramatic announcements. Just an email sent to the community. Due to recent events, we are resigning from our positions effective immediately. We wish the community the best. It was the first real crack in the board's armor. And trust me, when even your own allies abandon ship, it's a signal that the empire is crumbling. As the days went by, momentum built. A recall petition began circulating. Signatures poured in faster than I expected. Neighbors who had stayed quiet, fearing fines or retaliation, now signed boldly. It wasn't just my victory anymore, it had become a catalyst for change. People were sharing screenshots, copies of my survey, even snippets of the internal emails my attorney had uncovered. They weren't just angry, they were emboldened. And the HOA? Their credibility was evaporating. The president, once untouchable in her oversized chair and dramatic gavel-wielding routine, suddenly found herself on the defensive. Complaints about overreach, harassment, and abuse of power were now coming from multiple sources. Board meetings became tense, awkward affairs where residents challenged everything. The rumor mill, always busy, was in overdrive. People whispered about fines being reversed, other homeowners quietly filing complaints, and the possibility of legal action against board members themselves. The president's previous smugness was replaced by cautious silence. The very emails that had once shown her confidence in claiming my driveway now loomed like evidence in the court of public opinion. By the end of the week, the HOA's reputation had taken a nosedive. Gone were the days of unquestioned authority and minor tyrannies enforced with invisible hands. Instead, the community had tasted empowerment, and there was no going back. Standing in my driveway, I watched neighbors chatting, laughing, and reclaiming small freedoms. Kids were running across lawns that had been too decorative before. People were leaving potted plants out for the first time in years. A neighbor waved at me with a grin, holding a coffee mug that read, "Resistance is profitable." It was strangely cinematic, the entire neighborhood shaking off months, maybe years, of silent compliance. And somewhere, I think the HOA president realized that her reign of petty terror had ended. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about boundaries, rights, and the courage to push back. And the community was thriving in the fallout. I leaned against my car, smiled, and thought, sometimes, winning isn't just personal, it's contagious. And judging by the energy in the streets, my little battle had sparked a revolution. The HOA might still exist on paper, but in spirit? The board's authority was gone. And the neighborhood? It was ours again. The day finally came for the celebration I'd been planning since the judge ruled in my favor. The driveway, the same stretch of asphalt the HOA had tried to claim, was officially mine. And what better way to mark victory than with a full-blown neighborhood barbecue? I spent the morning setting up tables, stringing lights, and dusting off the grill that had sat quietly in my backyard for years. Neighbors began arriving, carrying dishes, coolers, and their best celebratory energy. There were burgers, hot dogs, coleslaw, potato salad, you name it. Someone even brought a giant chocolate cake with "property secured" written across it in icing. Honestly, it was peak adulting meets childhood joy. The kids were especially entertaining. Armed with colored chalk, they scrolled all over the driveway, drawing arrows, stars, and most importantly, signs that read, "My property" in huge, confident letters. I watched them run back and forth, tracing the exact boundaries the court had confirmed, and couldn't help but laugh. The driveway had never looked so alive. And of course, I had to park my car in the most dramatic way possible, right in the center of the driveway, doors wide open, put up like a victory monument. Neighbors cheered. Someone snapped photos. Honestly, it felt like my own tiny version of a parade float, just with more tires and less glitter. As the sun began to dip, the drone shot came together perfectly. From above, you could see the entire scene, tables full of food, laughter spilling across the lot, kids running in circles, adults chatting and clinking glasses. The driveway, once a battleground of HOA nonsense, now radiated life and community. Every corner of asphalt was a small victory, every smiling neighbor a symbol that standing up works. I wandered through the crowd, shaking hands, hugging people, and listening to their stories of what they'd quietly endured from the HOA. But tonight, there were no letters, no fines, no threats, just freedom, camaraderie, and the smell of perfectly grilled burgers. Later, as the grill cooled and twilight fell, I stood on the edge of my driveway and looked around. The kids had drawn one final chalk masterpiece, a giant arrow pointing directly at me, with the words, "Owner, Hazel," beneath it. I chuckled and whispered to myself, they can't take this one back. I stepped aside to let a neighbor show me the aerial footage from the drone. Seeing the driveway in full view, alive with color, movement, and sheer ownership, I felt a rare sense of cinematic satisfaction. The battle, the emails, the fines, the meetings, it had all led to this single, perfect moment of triumph. And as I stood there, the final voiceover in my head felt inevitable. Stand up for what's yours. HOAs count on fear, but all it takes is one homeowner who refuses to be bullied. The words hung in the warm evening air as neighbors waved, laughed, and celebrated, the driveway fully reclaimed. It wasn't just asphalt anymore, it was a statement. A reminder. A symbol of resilience. By the time the last burgers were eaten and the drone landed, I felt it, complete closure. Not just legally, but emotionally. That driveway wasn't just mine on paper, it belonged to every person who had supported me, cheered me on, or simply dared to hope I'd win. And somewhere in the distance, I swear I could hear the HOA president muttering into her phone, realizing that sometimes, rules don't matter when someone refuses to be intimidated. Tonight, the driveway wasn't a battleground. It was a stage. A celebration. And the hero of the story, well, let's just say she wore a victorious grin, possibly with ketchup on her fingers from one of the best burgers in history. Victory, laughter, chalk art, and a perfectly parked car. That's how a driveway becomes a legend.